Hey everyone, today I want to discuss what we need for the future of DBD, what we need in order for the game to survive potentially another 10 years. Let's get into it. I think the first cool thing for me that stands out above everything or anything else that needs to happen now and in the future is meta shifts, particularly when it comes to perks. Perks, in all honesty, are probably the thing that keeps Dead by Daylight alive the most, aside from new content drops. So the first big thing I want to see personally is more frequent meta shifts, but also large perk overhauls, with us not having a truly significant one since the infamous 6.1.0 patch, where we got over 40 changed in one go. This kind of thing really keeps the game alive and makes sure it never gets stale, and also gives different perks or just ideas even a time in the spotlight. It makes the game infinitely more interesting, and it appeases the long-term play as well, which is a key thing that is required for the game's survival. Whilst we do always need a constant inflow of new players, we also need to keep the long-term players happy. This for me also applies to killers and maps. For killers, I would love if there was finally a notable meta shift. We've already kind of seen this with the nerf to Blight, finally making him 4.4, and just having reasonable downsides to his power usage. However, there's characters like Nurse who have been in the game now for 10 years almost, yet she's never shifted from the top spot. I'd love to see Nurse nerfed and then to see how a tier list shapes up afterwards. Shake things up and let other characters shine and see what happens. The same goes for maps too. Maps have probably been the core issue with game balance since the very start, as by their nature they often control the outcome of the trial even if they aren't really meant to. Their RNG nature and the fact they're simply not all made equal makes them a constant point of contention when it comes to matches. I would love to see maps get a focus and potentially even just remove some of the more problematic ones, having them return when they've been quote-unquote fixed. Have a map pool even potentially which rotates from chapter to chapter, giving us fresh new maps each time and allowing for maps outside of the pool to be worked on whilst they're gone, making their return even more exciting. The meta is super important, I think, for interest and longevity of the game. Interesting licenses. By this I mean an expansion out of the current licenses we know. Whilst I do think the vision of DBD's world is important, and horror should definitely stay as the focus of the game, I also think for the future of it and for its survival we do need to start adding in licenses that are a bit more out there and just to draw in a new crowd. As I do think if the game continues to largely focus on just horror, it's going to start struggling as the pool of new people becomes smaller. If it were to start introducing more horror adjacent licenses like Tokyo Ghoul, D&D, and even Tomb Raider, it would do wonders for the game. I'm thinking specifically big, heavy hitters like Star Wars. Vader being in the game is a constant discussion point nowadays, and I'm definitely on the side personally of it working very well for the game, and fitting it despite it not being straight horror. A huge license like this would do wonders for the game and bring in so many new people, and it does work well still as a license for DBD too. Vader, whilst he is presented as less horrific in the movies, as they aren't like 18s or whatever, can still become that in DBD, especially with the entity's influence. It wouldn't feel out of place at all. Other big ones I'd like to see are Homelander from The Boys, as I think he's a great villain and personality that would be very exciting to get into DBD. Personality type characters are great I think, and some of the most successful ones in DBD history, like Wesker. Pair up a fun power with a character like this and it'd be a complete home run. Or even just a well-adapted character like Kaneki, where he's not exactly pulling out loads of quippy lines or whatever, but he is compelling despite this and an engaging character that is also one of the most popular ones we've ever had. And that's coming from someone who had never even heard of Tokyo Ghoul before this chapter dropped. Fixing bugs. This is a fairly simple point and one which I don't really have much to elaborate on, as my whole point is just trying to make the game as bug-free as possible. Over the past few years, it feels like almost every patch now has some kind of massive bugs that comes in and something or someone is always breaking in some way, being notably worse around when the engine of the game gets updated, where everything just seems to fall apart for a few weeks to a month. This gets tiring to say the least, and I think especially as a long-term player, it does go beyond this many times. It's sort of funny to have one situation where we have a Jim the Beam in the lobby screen, but when this kind of thing starts happening almost every major patch, it gets grating after some time and loses the humor it might have had once. Bugs need to be ironed out and eliminated from the game to be enjoyed into the future. More modifiers. This is a big one and one that needs to happen I think in order for the game to survive. The game was already drying up somewhat for long-term players a few years ago, and it felt somewhat revitalized and saved when we got the announcement of modifiers. The first year of these came in the form of Lights Out, Chaos Shuffle, 2v8 and My Little Oni, yet the following year we've been restricted to just Chaos Shuffle and 2v8, even though it feels like it should go the other way and we need to be getting more variety when it comes to modifiers, not less. Modifiers after all really do keep the game fresh and also seem to bring in a lot of people. Obviously they do have some issues as well, notably 2v8 with its queue times, and Chaos Shuffle with its just sort of lack of hype, I'd say, nowadays. As I've mentioned before, Chaos Shuffle feels like it should probably just be a core mechanic, and not necessarily an event even. When it comes to ideas for new modifiers, I have mentioned a few of these before, but some ideas for modes I think would be fun are a 1v1 mode where players spawn at the killer shack of a selected map, and must take in turns hunting the other as a killer and then a survivor. Add in a leaderboard too to make it more exciting, and everyone can compete for the longest chase time or the quickest catch. A prop hunter mode similar to the mobile edition of the game, where 8 survivors are able to hide as props and 2 killers must hunt them down across various realms. An OG Dead by Daylight mode where we travel back in time and play the game as if it were 2016 or 2017, somewhere in the early days, and see what it was like back then. A powered up mode could be fun, where all perks and items are doubled in power and let the chaos ensue. Some kind of duck hunt mode where survivors must run a sort of obstacle course whilst ranged killers fire on them. I feel there's so many crazy ideas you could experiment with and try out, and it feels like the surface hasn't even been scratched currently. Updating old content. This is a big one in my opinion and has been proven worthwhile over the years, and especially recently with the updates to the All Kill chapter, where we finally got a map for it as well as a trickster rework. This was pretty invaluable and did a lot for the game, and it was just nice to revisit a whole chapter like this in such a significant way, essentially going back and repolishing it, giving it a new coat of paint and letting it relive its moment in the sun. Whilst I don't think every chapter needs this, there definitely are some that could use it greatly, especially from the early days, as much of that content now is quite outdated. One of the earliest chapters I'd love to see get some kind of rework or revamp is of Flesh and Mud, or Hag's chapter. I'd like to see this one especially as much of the content of this chapter hasn't been updated almost at all. Swamp, for example, is the only realm I believe which didn't undergo the Realm Beyond update, and still hasn't, even though this was originally planned or slated for a couple years ago now. In some ways I kind of wish they'd just take Swamp out the game until it's ready and reworked, as currently the map is still quite problematic. This chapter also has Hag, which is easily one of the most outdated and also struggling killers, who has plummeted in strength over the years as the game has gotten faster and faster in pace. Ace is probably the most solid part of this chapter, but even he holds perks that focus on one of the most underloved mechanics, luck. In fact, debatably even more unloved now that self-unhooks are entirely dependent on perks. Luck as a mechanic feels even more pointless, and Ace's perks are very luck focused. So a full rework to Swamp, a visual update and upgrade to Hag and her power, and a rework or reshuffle of Ace's perks would be huge, I think. And this is just one example of a chapter that needs it. Realistically, there's a bunch more as well. However, choosing a chapter like this to revisit each year I think would do the game a lot of good, and also just make older and particularly neglected content and characters feel much more loved. This is also a great compromise I think over adding more content to the game, as the game does already suffer from bloating due to there being so much inside and being constantly added to it, yet there not being enough time to appropriately manage it all and actually balance and adjust it accordingly. So much of the content feels somewhat abandoned and lost, and it's kinda sad. So this is a nice solution I think. Just trying to do it all in one go in concentrated bursts. Free to play. This is a controversial topic and varies depending on who you ask, as some people hate this idea, as it will inevitably bring a whole new wave of cheaters who are able to easily get accounts due to the game being free. Yet equally there's the possibility of so many new players finding the game if they were to do this. Tens of thousands easily who will come and check out the game and give it a shot. In some ways it feels almost surprising the game isn't already free to play, as there is so much purchasable content already inside. It can often feel slightly pointless having the game have a price tag at all, considering there is so much to buy and interact with inside, with all of the purchasable characters, riffs, and also cosmetics. Bringing in a new wave of players makes a decent portion of them likely to interact with all of these purchases anyway, and so the entry payment does seem a bit redundant nowadays. If a £15 price tag is the barrier between someone trying the game or not, then it's 100% worth it in my opinion to make the game free. To extend this as well, I think a lot of the game needs to become free alongside this. There's a bunch of content now, over 40 chapters, after year 10 I think at least, so making the first 10 for example completely free seems reasonable, aside the licenses of course. Just adding and allowing newer players to have some of the game's earlier content would be such a great idea I think, and a great quality of life boost as well, as it also makes unlocking so much of the game less intimidating, knowing that you start out with far more. A much larger chunk of content, rather than being faced with a wall of characters you're likely never going to be able to unlock with just Eerie shards say. I think free to play and making a portion of older content especially free is really important for the game's survival. More community input. This was a popular idea when I asked my Discord community what they thought, specifically when it comes to things like the Grimoire chapter, but also I think elements like PTBs and consultants as well. Including player feedback more and giving us more behind the scenes information and input is invaluable, I think, in letting us see how things work and happen, but also giving us a chance to influence it when we can too. I think these things are true as well. The times we've been given more of an input and insight, I'd like to think it has helped the final product. With the Grimoire, we've crafted a really interesting chapter that has been executed by the devs. Things like the blight changes and certain killer alterations happened as a result of consultants. Then things being tested on PTBs, even if they don't end up coming to the game, have also been pretty huge, I think, and have made the game overall better. Not just pushing changes and rolling with it, but actually stopping and rolling things back. These are all great, and I guess the through line here is communication between community and the devs, and there not being secrecy behind things or confusion even why something has been altered or changed. No more like randomly gutting a character out of the blue and such. When there's that line of communication, things are just better, I think. I think even more so when it comes to presenting things early and in the prototype stages, like I was lucky enough to do with the Judgment. I think having creators present to the community like this works well and does give the community an insight from very active players who have managed to get hands-on with the character. Expansion out. This one is maybe like a bit silly and just a bit of fun, but I think for DBD to truly reach the next stage of growth or development, it needs to put real time and effort into expanding out, beyond the core game. This has been attempted a few times in the past, most notably with the casting of Frank Stone, but it didn't seem all too successful. Despite this, I really hope it doesn't end there, as Frank Stone, at least as a lore enjoyer, was still great, and had many positives. Expanding DBD out beyond the core game is a must-have or much-needed thing for the game to have longevity when going 10 years plus. We do have the quite exciting DBD movie, which has been in the works for some time now, but I hope there will be more spin-off games and more attempts to try and draw players in that way, because I think it's really great when the world expands out like this. A subcategory of this is the lore itself, the story of the game, which I'm leaving here till last as I know lots of people just don't really care. But this is a key factor I think for the game's survival, and one of the main issues with the lore, to be succinct, is that it hasn't felt like there's ever been a clear through line or narrative that connects everything together. I think a key thing and something that would do great entering post year 10 would be a notable drive toward a new narrative for DBD, a coherent lore focus and story that actually builds towards something that has notable effects in game, and in general a more encompassing lore experience, which can be accessed far easier than it is currently. The game could be so greatly enhanced by elements like more engaging and easily accessible lore, and whilst it's a big task, I think it's perfectly possible. This ties back into the wider universe too, and the expansion of the game, as having the core lore in place there makes it easier to expand out, and gives people who come from those expanded areas something to really engage with. So there we have it, they're my top things we need for DBD to survive. Hopefully another 10 years. Thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts as always down below. Thanks, and good.